Hey adapters, welcome back. Today our guest is Erin Rothman. Erin has 18 years of stormwater and remediation consulting experience working with cities across the United States. Recognizing a need for innovative data capture to manage urban and coastal flooding, Erin founded StormSensor with the objective of managing climate risk through creating intelligent stormwater, sewer, and coastal infrastructure. Today, Erin and I will talk about how StormSensor empowers their customers to make informed stormwater management decisions. Unlike traditional storm and sewer monitoring solutions that conduct only targeted spot checks, StormSensor's Terrapin networks are deployed citywide at a fraction of the cost. Hey, Erin, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
All right, we're going to talk stormwater, and this is very important
Sure.
work. Very excited about it, but let's just start off though. What is StormSensor?
So StormSensor is a company that I founded 5 years ago. We work with cities across the country, deploying networks and developing resiliency models to really understand where within communities the highest risk areas are as it relates to both climate risk and then also infrastructure risk as well.
All right, so you've been doing this more or less for 18 years in my introduction, but how did you get started in stormwater in the first place?
I was a vice president at a consulting company in Seattle, and we brought in a stormwater team. And for the first time in our company's history, we promptly began losing money and we couldn't figure out what was going on. So I talked to my guys in the field, and they said that every time we had to sample or it rained at the office, they had to go sample their sites. But just because it was raining here doesn't mean it was raining there. So on average, we're going out 4 times. We can't build the time, and it's not conducive to consulting models. And I said, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Why don't we just have a rain gauge that texts us when it rains? And they said, why don't you go invent that? And I said, I will, and I'm going to call it Storm Sensor. So that's how it started. But I had no software or hardware experience at the time. So it took a couple years to get started on that.
Well, that's awesome. You developed that from scratch. But so 5 years ago, you start StormSensor. You go off on your own. You're the CEO there, and so the need to sort of establish your own company there. What you hoping to do differently?
One of the biggest issues that we had we identified was the inability or the expense associated with getting data, because you can't make good decisions regarding how to operate anything without data and without understanding how a system's functioning. And what I found out after talking to cities was that we really don't know how much water is moving through our storm or sewer systems at any time until it's too late. And what I realized that if we only need to monitor flow, and we can't use our competitors' sensors because they're too expensive. We couldn't afford it. So we couldn't really map how water moves. So we just needed to develop our own. So we monitor depth and velocity and temperature. And we do that in networks. So we have multiple monitoring points throughout a city, and we're basically metering the last unmetered utility.
Okay, so you are now based in Charleston, but the company you cover nationally, right?
Right. We're deployed across the country.
All right. Well, tell us a bit about the team, though. I mean, what makes up StormSensor? Who do you need to make your company operate?
Well, while we started in sensors, we do have a brilliant hardware team led by Greg. We also, our focus is on the software, the data, and the insights that come out of those sensors, and then also pulling that data in from additional sources. So we have a pretty large software development team, both back end and front end, and we also have a significant data analytics team as well.
All right. So when you think of stormwater and such, storm events and rain and everything, but there's a bigger picture that you're trying to solve here. And let's talk a little bit about climate change. How does that factor into what you're doing?
Well, climate change is happening. It's already happened. So unless we not just stop it, but also reverse it immediately, we have to deal with these issues. And what those issues are, they vary pretty widely, from everything from not enough rain to too much rain. Where we do have too much rain, oftentimes we have storms that are more frequent and more intense. And if you think about our infrastructure, which is aging, that infrastructure was designed 50 or 100 years ago. So fewer storms, less pavement, less people. So we're overtaxing our infrastructure already based on its age. Then we're adding the impacts of climate change and additional rainfall to those systems. And if you're on the coasts and along some rivers and lakes, you're also dealing with storm surges and other issues associated with that. So it's just a nightmare, and you can't really see it until it comes above ground, you've got flooding issues.
Well, how does that come into conversations with clients? Because there are some probably proactive cities and communities that are thinking climate change. We're going to have infrequent or extreme storm events. Others who are just like, you know what, we just want to drain some water here. How does that work as you're doing these conversations with people? Does climate change come into that very often?
It does. I'd say we're about 50-50 on climate change. So there are a lot of communities that are looking at it. So Virginia, or Norfolk, Virginia, for example, is one of our customers that's dealing with sea level rise. So we're working with them to understand capacity issues within their systems, and then also highlighting areas within their community that are higher priority to fix. And oftentimes, the areas that are dealing with the most significant issues related to flooding or sea level rise are also areas that are older and lower income. And oftentimes get missed when cities are making these changes. But we can use our data, incorporate the climate information, and really highlight those areas that need it most.
All right. I think of these extreme storm events like Harvey that hit Houston. I wonder someone like you, as you saw that unfolding. I don't know if you worked with the city of Houston and StormSensor, but you must have been like, okay, our product would have been in this kind of situation. Like, could you elaborate on how you kind of view something like that?
Well, first off, Harvey and Irma and all those, that storm year was insane and devastating. And for situations like that, there's almost nothing that anyone can do because the volume of water that was moving through those communities is just, 20 feet of water in some cases. But what I thought outside of the holy shit, I can't believe this is actually happening to these poor people, is people are going to get what we're doing now. This is why we exist and what we're trying to fix and how we want to work with communities to understand how these storms move through, how you can adapt and modify and improve your existing infrastructure to be able to handle not necessarily the Harveys, but anything below that, which is more common.
And I guess your product too is it's sort of preemptively trying to be able to respond to these things more effectively.
Exactly. So applications can be immediate. So that you have a backup in an area. You have a storm coming. So you can target maintenance based on real-time needs. And then as you're capturing data over a longer period of time, you're able to see which areas have the biggest issues, which ones have the least capacity, which ones most frequently back up or flood. And then you can incorporate that into your capital improvement plans and actually be able to fix it based on real data.
Okay, so you mentioned infrastructure just a little bit earlier, but infrastructure is in the news in a big way. We've heard announcements and funding that's coming in. Nothing's dedicated yet, but it sounds like there's a lot of momentum there and obviously very relevant to what you do. And I think even in what we heard recently is that like replacing all lead pipes. But if you think about replacing lead pipes and all these kind of things, what else can you do at those times? And so how are you thinking about maybe this newfound emphasis on infrastructure?
What I think, well, first off, I'm delighted because I have done so much work in infrastructure and just understanding that we've primarily done a run to failure model. And what people expect is for their infrastructure to work, but they don't necessarily expect to pay for it because it has always done that. Right now, we're starting to see failures on an ongoing basis. And what that means with this infrastructure planning and infrastructure funding is that cities are actually going to be able to fix it. It doesn't necessarily require massive new taxes or some other budget modification that they have to implement or giving up something else in order to have these things work. So to actually be able to fix the problem that we know we have and not just watch it happen is going to be, I think, fundamental as a shift for our country and for our growth in the future.
Awesome. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the technology that you guys are using. So what are Scoot sensors?
So Scoots, and just so you know, the way that we were trying to figure out what to call our sensors way back when we were inventing them. And we thought Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, things that live in sewers. And we decided that we probably couldn't call our system Leonardo. So we thought turtles, and a scoot is an individual scale on a turtle shell.
Oh.
So all of the scoots together comprise our Terrapin network, and our software is Terrapin and Terrapin AI. So super nerdy backstory there.
I love it.
But so the scoots are the sensors that we place within storm, sewer, and sanitary infrastructure, and also along outfalls and right-of-ways and bridges. And what they do is monitor how water is moving through these systems. So whether it's standing water or flowing water. We can identify how it's moving, where it's coming from. And all of that data is transmitted every 5 minutes to our customer's app. And they're able to track issues in real time and then also track trends, as well as receive a variety of predictions based on both the data that we've captured historically as well as forecasted weather conditions.
I guess just out of my own curiosity, and so everything down to an app, that's so empowering to have that kind of information. Something changes. I mean, they're, I guess, trained or what, like they know how to respond to something that's probably amiss, right? How does that
Oh my
work?
gosh, yes. Yeah, the people that work in and around these sewer systems, the public works people, these guys are masters. They've been within these systems their entire careers. And I am constantly blown away at how good they are at their jobs and what they do and what they can know. What they can't know, though, is what's happening below ground if there's no sign above ground. And we help them identify what those issues are, and they know exactly how to fix it. All they need to do is understand what's happening or know that it's a thing. They just need the data.
All right, so some other technology, Terrapin
Mhm.
AI, is that, do I have
Mhm.
that right?
Yes.
Okay, what's that?
So that's our software. That's Terrapin Advanced Insights, which coincidentally is also artificial intelligence, and it's applicable as well. So what we do for that is we have a series of both our standard time series algorithms as well as some machine learning algorithms that help us basically track real-time conditions in the systems. We can also do kind of we do a kind of a resiliency risk model for communities that's called Surfer. And what that does is identify high risk areas, not or for flooding and climate risk, not based on FEMA, but based on a number of socioeconomic conditions as well as physical geographic factors. And we can pull our data into these models and really kind of see either validate the models or identify how real time data actually applies to more static data sets. And then cities can kind of see exactly how their system, how their city is operating and how their systems are operating and where they need to focus on fixes if there are any areas within their community that they don't actually have to build new infrastructure but can redirect flows and overflows, so you don't have to have a flooding issue. You might have a soccer field that could be used as temporary storage during storm events, but it allows them to really understand how their city is kind of connected and how the water moves through it.
Well, I think for some cities, it's probably a radical departure from what they've traditionally done if they work with you. I mean, what are those kind of moments like when someone who wants access to this information and you've just radically changed how they view data? I mean, how does, I mean, that must be kind of fun when you're introducing the product to them.
It is so much fun. I am a scientist, so I'm not, um, I don't really know how to be a salesperson. So what I do is I just show them the software. I say, I can talk about this all day, but to really, really explain what's happening and to see how this works, you just have to see it. And once they see it, it's beautiful and it's simple. And we designed it um, because I work, with engineers and scientists, and we're not necessarily known for our visual design and aesthetics. So a lot of the software that is developed for scientists and engineers is like it's just data, it's just charts, it doesn't need to look like anything. Well, I disagree. I think it should be beautiful. Everyone should have beauty and joy in their lives, and if it's stormwater, that's even better. Um, so they get to see it, and that's probably the easiest way for me to make a sale is just show them the software, what it looks, and what they get.
Awesome. Well, okay, so you're working with the City of Norfolk, right? Could you
Mhm. Yes.
describe what's going on there? What are how are they using it, and
Mhm.
how long have they been using the product?
Certainly. So we deployed our first network in Norfolk last summer, and they're using it. They have been modeling how basically how sea level rise is impacting their storm system. And they're focused on a neighborhood. They're doing some capital improvements to reduce flooding within this community and then also open it up because it's a low income area and it was kind of blocked off. It was like surrounded by highways. You couldn't get in or out easily. So as part of opening that up and bringing it into the city, they're also retrofitting the infrastructure to ensure that they're also mitigating flood risk. And what they found with our networks, they thought that they knew they had flooding all the time. They thought that the flooding was during heavy rain events or during high tide only. And what we found was that a significant portion of their system was at 80% capacity, 80% full on average, not just during storm events. And what that meant was that they did have to go back to the drawing board a bit to ensure that their new design could account for this additional volume that we found, because real data, there's nothing. Models are lovely, but real data really tells you what you need and what you need to spend. So they're able to improve their planning and their design based on the data that we found, and also kind of size the system for future risk, not just how sea level is right now and what they're dealing with right now, but also what they expect to deal with the next 20 or 50 years.
Well, Norfolk is kind of famous as a community really factoring in sea level rise, and yes, the flooding is an issue. And so that's great that they're working with you. And there's a huge military installation there. Did that come into play at all? I mean, everyone's sort of partners and working together, but were they a stakeholder in any sort of way when you were doing your work?
Not yet. I'm not going to say no, but not yet. So we're primarily working with the city, their resiliency group and their stormwater group.
And when I think more about stormwater, I'm thinking about the rain events and it's flooding the system. But you'd mentioned sea level rise, and that is just what do you see as the future there? Because there's all these coastal communities, and I'm from Florida, and places like Miami, they have unusual geology that it's going to make dealing with sea level rise a big challenge. I mean, is sea level rise just a big area for you?
It is, actually. So we're also in North Miami. We're in Jersey City looking at some of these issues as well. And so sea level rise, but then also urban flooding within these communities often as a result of climate change, but the aging infrastructure. And that's just because so much of the focus is on coastal areas, and FEMA maps and associated flood insurance are based on coastal estimates. But so much of the flooding that we're dealing with is not just sea level rise issues, it's inland at higher elevations, and it's due to the infrastructure issues that we're seeing.
Okay, so more broadly, we're talking about cloud-connected sensor networks here, and just there's a tool, there's technology that you can make sort of decisions from, but you have bigger ambitions at how this can improve the overall health of a community if you're using this kind of information. What do you mean by that?
So when you're looking at critical infrastructure, so we're looking at as we call it CI squared. So it's critical infrastructure and climate intelligence. All of these things are wholly integrated within a community. So you're dealing with the urban layer, you have the climate and the weather, the air quality, and you have the impacts of the weather and the climate, which is the context, 50 or 100 years ago within which this infrastructure was constructed. And now that's all changed. So the infrastructure is going to react differently. And then you have what's happening below ground and in waterways, whether it's the quantity of the water or the quality of water moving through these. So being able to tie all of those data sets together and really integrate and show visually how a community's impacted in different areas, where the heat island impacts are, where the air quality issues are, where the water quality impacts. If you have key indicators in advance that can be validated by the data that we're capturing, and really allow a city to fix 80% of the problem by applying a 20% solution, by really focusing on those overlapping factors.
All right, so how do you see your organization changing the landscape of environmental change? I know that's a big question, but
I think I'm not going to say we're pioneers, because we're not, but I think that the enthusiasm with which my team and our customers and our future customers are engaging with the information that we're creating and capturing, and the amount of the opportunities that we have to share what we find and what we do, I think we can make it a truly well-known, widespread, open issue that is something that can be fixed. I think a lot of the times we look at environmental issues as something that happens over there, or it's too expensive, or it's too late. But right now we can capture the data and we can empower these communities to make changes now that help us in the future. And as long as we do that now, and as long as we embrace it as a community and as a country and ultimately as a world, I think that we can bring our planet into some degree of equilibrium.
Well, on that note, so we've talked a bit about the technology and even the team that you have there, but there's a culture at StormSensor that you're promoting. What are you trying to do?
So We, we started as a startup, and startups are really, really hard because we're inventing something new, and we continue to invent new things. And a lot of people don't found a startup, for example, because it's really hard and everything breaks all the time. And you have to keep getting up and you have to keep going. And I have found that doing so kindly and open, with an openness, makes it both fun and accepting and encouraging. And we do have values. I have my values card, which no one can read.
A little bit.
There we go. But we have 5 values, and the values are creativity, integrity, unity, courage, and curiosity. And each one of those has a very specific meaning. So creativity, obviously, you want to be able to think outside the box and all that, and think, what if something was like this, and not kind of hold yourself back because you're afraid that someone else will think it's stupid, which then ties to courage, like coming up with new ideas, being able to share your ideas and not having any risk of looking dumb. I ask stupid questions all the time because I'm not an engineer. I can't build hardware or software, but my team can, and I can ask questions in front of my team. And then to go and share it with people because, before, things would break, and now we've got it pretty solidly working. But it took a lot of practice to get that moving, and that's okay, and it makes us stronger. And then integrity, obviously, always do the right thing, whether it's for your team, for your investors, for your customers. And I guess unity is that no matter what we're doing, we're all in this together. And whether it's the company or the community or the country, we're all humans and we're all dealing with the same issues.
Wow, do you get to bring those into the actual hiring process there at StormSensor? Is that come on early on?
I do. And I just got the cards printed. So my team who may be watching this, everyone's getting a care package from StormSensor that includes their values card.
Fantastic. Well, let's wrap this up. But if people want to learn more about StormSensor, how should they engage with you?
Email is the best way to do that for sure. So Erin@stormsensor.io.
Okay, and anybody else on the team that they should be in contact with, or if we want to do some follow up with?
Yeah, so as far as follow up, Alicia Amnasens on our team. So Alicia@stormsensor.io. She heads up our marketing. She's the one that got us in contact with each other. So she's brilliant.
Well, Erin, this has been a fantastic interview. You guys are just doing great stuff. This is just the guts of how countries and communities operate, right? And it's climate change makes our lives more difficult. We're going to have to just look to people like you to sort of keep that stability. And I really appreciate this conversation. And I think we're going to hopefully have some future conversations around some of the other work that you guys are doing.
I hope so.
All right. Well, sorry, were you going to say something?
Oh, I was just going to say this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
No, it's certainly our pleasure here at Simpatico. And hold on, we're going to go into just chatting, but I want to thank everybody for watching, and we'll be right back.